Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Discount Supplements. Discount Supplements are Ireland's largest retailer of sports nutrition and health foods, and they've been helping their customers achieve their fitness goals over the last 12 years and are an Irish family-run business. Personally, I've been using Discount Supplements for years. So for those of you who've been following me since the very beginning on, say, Instagram or Facebook, these are the company that I always tag, particularly if you're in Ireland. They've got great prices, their products always arrive on time, and if you're lucky, sometimes you get a little bit of a freebie if you have an order of a certain amount or more. So I can't recommend them enough. If you need to pick up your sports supplements, they're my go-to place personally. So to pick them up or to check them out, head over to discountsupplements.ie and use their discount code BK2019 for 10% off for any podcast listeners. That's BK as in Brian Keane, 2019 for 10% off. That's discountsupplements.ie. Now on to today's episode. Quick introduction to today's podcast with one of my 5 people and one of the closest people to me in my life personally, one of my inner circle, Paul Dermody. This is random episode number 3. So this one is back by popular demand, off the back of the amount of incredible feedback from episode number 2 and random episode number 1. Today's episode, based on feedback, is gone a little bit longer than the previous 2 episodes, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you've ever wondered how to create your own inner circle, or how my personal conversations go with the people closest to me, this is the podcast to listen to. I hope you enjoy this really incredibly wide-ranging conversation with Paul, where we cover things. Jesus, we cover so much, but things from not pressing the fuck it button on your diet. Paul is big on his platforms for not pressing the fuck it button, which basically means that if you've, eaten one bad meal, that you don't press the fuck it button and throw the whole day out of whack, and how he applies that all through different areas of his life. The step-by-step strategy we both use for overcoming fear, different approaches to building self-confidence, the importance of your inner circle and letting them point out your weaknesses so that you can become better at keeping your dick in your pants if you want your relationship to work. So we kind of ebb and flow, where there's parts where it's super serious, talking about working out character flaws and some of the kind of traumas that I've dealt with, and try to build a stronger version of myself off the back of it, to keeping your dick in your pants. So this is literally how our conversations go when we meet for coffee. So this is really, if you can imagine, it's as if it's a fly on the wall conversation, because we literally talk how we talk in conversation when it's just the two of us meeting for coffee, where we go very serious, where we talk about different goals, talk about different strategies, and yet we can be kind of really stupid and silly at times. So there's other things in here, like how to use the eat the frog strategy to help you overcome procrastination, and much, much more. We went on for nearly 2 hours in this one. The last episode, random episode number 2, was an hour and a half, and I got so many DMs and messages off people saying I did not want that to end, please make the next one longer. So this one we just kept rolling, and I hope you enjoy it. There's so much in here. I spoke a lot about the 4 quadrants that I use. I know that's been very popular with people recently. My 3rd book that'll be out later this year, the working title of Life Mindset, is based off the philosophy of those 4 quadrants: health, wealth, love and fulfillment, and using those as metrics to keep yourself accountable in different areas, and then just the mindset in order being able to work backwards from whatever the end goal is. So we talk about that today. Brainstormed it back and forth with Paul, so I hope you enjoy it. I freaking loved this one. This is one of my favorite episodes that I've recorded, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed recording it. Without further ado, random episode number 3 with Paul Dermody. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm back by popular demand. This is the random episode 3 with Paul Dermody. Paul, welcome back for another random episode, of which we don't know what we'll be covering yet.
Hola a todos. Thank you, dude. It's great to be back. I really appreciate it.
Mate, the amount of DMs that I got off the back of random episode 1 and particularly random episode 2, because we went longer with that one, was just amazing. I got so many DMs, and I still get tags on Instagram stories from that episode. So I'll link it in the show notes for those of you who haven't listened. Since we connected last in terms of random episode 2, which I think was in about 3 months ago, if I'm going right from our Skype timeline. Tell everybody what you've been up to since. You're back home, you're back in Galway, you've taken a trip away from Barcelona. Talk us through where you are in the world.
Yeah, actually, just before even I go into that, dude, would you believe that it's directly because of you and talking to you on the podcast that I've been able to literally sign up a couple of clients from your podcast directly. So thank you for that, first and foremost. But yeah, I moved back from Barcelona. Without getting too heavy straight away, one of my baseline philosophies in life is never get so naive enough to think that not every decision is consequence free or free of consequences. So being away was awesome. It was incredible. But the consequence of that is time away from those you love. So back in the country, closer to those I love, sacrificed a little bit of sunshine. When I say it out loud, I realize what a idiot I sound like, sacrificing a bit of sunshine. But yeah, I'm back in the country until the summer, doing one-to-one PT again, doing online and a little bit of one-to-one, simply because I actually genuinely missed the face-to-face interaction more than I thought I would. And back in the country till summer, then me and Orla are likely going to be heading off traveling around Vietnam, which I'm probably not allowed to tell people. And now I've just told your entire audience. But,
there you go. That's got straight out to 80, 90,000 people.
I've told like 4 people, and Orla's like, we better not say anything yet. And I'm like, okay. And then I just go and tell the world. But yeah, that's what I'm up to now, man.
And talk to me about being home, because we've caught up a few times over coffee. You know, we try and make it a weekly thing, even when possible. How are you finding being back in terms of the pros and the cons? Because you were in Barcelona, was it 6 months total?
Yeah, 7.
7.
I love being home just because it's closer to people, dude. And I'm very fortunate that the job I do, I love. Technically, I can do it from anywhere in the world, but it's a lot easier to orchestrate one-to-one personal training when you speak the language fluently. So the pros are I get to be near Orla, obviously. I get to be near your good self, my family. Cons are the sunshine. I do miss the sunshine a lot. I don't know if anybody's ever been to a place where they just feel very connected to a certain place, but I get that from Barcelona. Every time I go back, I feel very homely. I love the Spanish culture. I love the Spanish life. You've been to Barcelona. You like it quite a bit, don't you?
Yeah, I loved it. It's funny because priorities change, particularly, you know, Holly's nearly 4 now, but priorities changed for me a few years ago. But that was always originally my plan when I moved my business online. I had toyed with, you know, the 4-hour work week job, in the sense of, you know, the worst title of a book ever. But like, the message is, you know, to be able to work from anywhere in the world. And I kind of built the business to do that. And then Holly was born, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to stay put because this is more important. So it's funny, but I would have been similar to you. I probably would have done exactly what you did had circumstances been different. I wouldn't change it for anything, but I can see the allure. I can see the pull of sun, hot country, but you miss people. Like, you know, even when you were gone, you know, I missed hanging out because we talked regularly over WhatsApp and Instagram, etc. But it's not the same. You know, it's not the same as when you're meeting someone weekly to catch up properly.
And it's funny too, because it is not the same, because when I am nearer you, for example, different people have we talk all the time about your network being so crucial. You have this ability to pull ambition and drive out of me that I believe is there, but I could easily forget that. In the sense of, I see what you're up to, and I just see the work and the passion, and like, I take a lot from how self-focused and self-disciplined you are, without any desire to, like, you know, tear anybody else's building down. I really mean that, and I get a lot from that because you're just so hyper-focused. So when I'm away from that, I could get easily comfortable and not do the extra work that doesn't have to be done, if you get me. So it's a massive advantage. I actually started reading the 4-hour work week on your recommendation. I'm only about up to page 30 because, you know, I'm a very long reader, but we both believe certain books nearly just come into your life when you need them, don't they? Like,
Yeah, that's when you told me about Vietnam, and anybody that's considering like either moving their business online or moving abroad, because that book talks quite a lot about relative income in the sense that if you earn, you know, €40,000 a year on Irish income or UK income, but you're living in Thailand or Vietnam, that's worth at least double over there. And it speaks a lot about relative income. It's a great read. That's one of the few books that I come back to every year. I literally read the 4 Hour Workweek because it's quite a short read in the greater scheme of some of the other books that I come back to yearly. But that's one I regularly get something from every time. Even though parts of it are kind of outdated now because he talks about software and virtual assistants, and that isn't applicable now in terms of some of those businesses aren't around anymore. But the ideas of the Pareto distribution, that's where I actually learned about the 80-20 philosophy, the 80-20 principle that we're both massive fans of. For those of you unfamiliar, Pareto distribution, that, you know, 20% of your effort leads to 80% of your results in most cases. And that's where I actually learned about that book. So I think you'll get a lot from it.
I think so. One of the things I've already gotten from it that I kind of already know, you'll definitely agree with this. Well, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but you need so much less than you think you do. If you're able to live under your means, which I think we're both fortunate enough that we kind of just happen to do. If you're able to live underneath your means, you can really start planning for, like, if you want to move your business online, for example, like you talk about, like, you don't need a lot of shit. You need food and rent, in my opinion, anyway. And even that's been touched on in the 4 Hour Workweek, how, or at least that's what I've got from it, that certain people work crazy hours for crazy money when technically they could work less, kind of earn slightly less and do more of what they love if they just cut back a little bit. Or at least that's what I've gotten from it. I hope I haven't misinterpreted it entirely.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that because I put up on my Instagram stories, I was doing one of the 10 question Q&As recently, and I've got a whiteboard. It's ironically, just that whiteboard's right in front of me now because it's where I shoot my Instagram Q&As, but I've made a note there, and one of them is the luxury trap, which is a reminder to myself, are you doing stuff you don't want to buy shit you don't need? And then I've got golden handcuffs, and which is effectively is what you're doing now handcuffing you to do something that you don't want to do just because you have a perceived lack that you need more money or you need some other external thing. And I need to have it as a reminder personally because I have a personality type and we're slightly different in this sense. I'm a bit more type A, go, go, go. You know, it's why I find hitting targets, hitting goals relatively easy in the sense of I can get focused and I can get clear. But that can also have a downside, you know, there's a catch-22 to everything, that you can have this perceived lack, that you're constantly striving for something else, you're constantly looking for more money, you're constantly looking for the external thing, and I have to bring myself back and remind myself of that a lot. I actually get that from your presence more than probably any even book that I've read or reminder that I have on a whiteboard, because I think what we're fortunate to do is we're very similar in ways, in the way we think, and our values are very similar, but we're very different in other ways. You know, you're so present, and I've spoke about this in the random episode too, that your ability to focus on what's important right now and be happy in the moment is second to none. Like, I've never met anybody who has that same ability to just be connected with the person they're talking to right now. And that's something I've tried to hone and take myself. And I think we're fortunate in that sense that your perceived weaknesses, such as staying focused, etc., and my perceived weaknesses, such as being present and being happy with what I have, they're both natural strengths in either one of us, and we tend to take from each other, which I think is a good message for anybody who's looking to figure out who they should spend their time with in terms of designing your own inner circle of people that you spend the most time with.
Oh, 100%. And I think one of the biggest strengths about the way we communicate with one another in that respect, and I say this in case anybody's listening to this and thinks, holy shit, that happens to me. Anything that needs to be corrected with one another is not a backhanded jibe. We'll never criticize or scathe for scathe's sake, but we won't shirk the truth, which is a bit of a fine art. But we talk frequently. You know, a conversation not had today is kind of difficult, but it's hell in 10 years, which I mean, we probably touched on this before, but because we touch on it so frequently when we meet and when we talk, that's what I get the most out of personally. I take traits and characteristics that I know I'm devoid of, that I know that my life will be better, that you help. And it's a key to your network because you don't make backhanded comments. There's no like jealousy or envy. I don't ever look at you and think, oh, he has 20 times my following and X amount my Y. I think, holy shit, they're characteristics that if I was able to apply, perhaps my future could look a little bit brighter. And well, vice versa. I like to think it's kind of a similar give and take in that respect. But having every conversation we've ever had, when you think about it, is borderline offensive, because it's about to be, hey, if you didn't do this one thing, your life would be a lot better. And sometimes you're not ready to let go of that one little characteristic that's been actually, like, we all do it. We both work in the fitness industry. We both work with people who, like, technically are not where they want to be with their body composition. It sounds a bit straightforward to say, just manage your calories and eat less. But if it was that straightforward, it's about addressing habits. And we often see something, I think, in somebody that we're like, you know what, I could really buy into that person. I could really take a lot of what they're about. I like the way they talk. I like the way they talk to and about people. And I like the system they use to get the best out of me. I can't speak for you, but my system to get the best out of people is to tell them straight out how much of a fuckhead they're being. I'll do it to you, and you would do it to me, and I'll do it to clients. And some people aren't able for that. But there's such a huge difference between backhanded, miscommunication, almost critique for critique's sake. I love the phrase that white lies will eventually become black truths. Lies that are seemingly harmless become very harmful, and black truths are almost truths for truth's sake when you let them build up to a point you regret. And it's lovely having a friendship that you can go, oh, hey, dude, haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Noticed you said or did this thing a couple of weeks ago. That doesn't serve you very well. If you were able to stop that stupid habit, your life could look a little bit better. And it's really hard to hear at the time, because usually you're not ready to let go of it. Anytime you called me on something, I'm like, oh, he's right. I hate him, but he's right. And if I'm resisting, I often go back and think, well, why did I resist that? Oh, yeah, not ready to let go.
That is something, that thought process and mindset is something that has served me more than anything else over the last probably 2 or 3 years. We've known each other several years now, but I've particularly been focused on improving it and ironing it out over the last several years, that if you say something to me, and because you regularly call me on my shit, like, I'm so fortunate, and you're one of the few people I'll go to when I'm like, man, am I being completely irrational when I'm making this decision? Even when I met you a couple of weeks ago, I was I needed some advice on just a relationship, a personal relationship that I was kind of in. And you were just kind of a sounding board for, you're probably being irrational in this area. That has no, something that I get caught on, and I have a big focus on this in my third book that I'm writing currently, on the story, getting caught up in your own story, and misaligning or confusing facts and opinions, because the facts are everything that's laid out, that's literally what's in front of you, all the things that have happened with you and a partner, or all the things that have happened with you and your job, or all the things that have happened with you and your relationship with food or the gym right now. Your opinions are your attachment to it. It's like, oh, well, that's shit, or that person was being really mean, or, that diet doesn't work, or that coach was crap. It's like their opinions. And when you're able to disconnect from the two things and realize that facts and opinions aren't the same, it allows you to be a little bit more objective with dealing with your shit. And when you call me on my stuff, and I'm saying this to try and provide value to people listening, because when people call you on your stuff and you feel resistance, ask yourself, why am I feeling resistant? Why did that annoy me? I talk regularly about the purple polar bear, that if somebody calls you a purple polar bear, you're like, okay, that's cool. Like, you're fucking lunatic. Like, but if somebody says, oh, you're fat, or you're ugly, or you're stupid, or, you're inconsiderate, and that resonates and lands, as you said, it's a sign that, one, you're probably not ready to let go of it, but two, it landed for a reason. And that's an opportunity to look at a characteristic or a personality trait or a flaw that you may have and improve on it. And I know myself, I'm super grateful for it. As we say, I'd rather be kissed by kissed by the truth instead of punched by a lie. But what's your phrase? You're punched by...
Yeah, you'd rather be punched hard by the truth than kissed by a lie, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like that philosophy, because it allows you to identify where you're not showing up the way you're supposed to show up. You know, if you're constantly cheating on your diet and everyone around you is like, it's cool, it's all right, it's Friday night, or it's Saturday, or it's Sunday, or it's fucking Monday morning, or it's your birthday, or it's fucking your dog's sister's cousin's birthday. Like, you know, that's looking for an excuse to justify your behavior, as opposed to somebody calling you out and being like, no, you shouldn't be eating that fucking food at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. It doesn't serve the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. Or you shouldn't be going out to a nightclub on Saturday night and hooking up with the first guy or girl because you're looking for something serious. Having somebody call you on that, even when you don't want it, and probably especially when you don't fucking want it, is so important for personal development. Because you can read all the fucking books you want. You know, you can read my book, you can read Tony Robbins, you can read Jack Canfield, you can read 100 million books, but to have someone who's in your life who wants the best for you calling you on something and it feels super uncomfortable, that's your opportunity to get better. You know, get comfortable being uncomfortable and you will grow personally and you'll literally get whatever you want, but you got to get out of your own head. You got to get out of your own way. And that's something that I've tried to hone. I'm very grateful for that. And I think something that's came up a lot, Paul, with episode 1 and episode 2, the random episodes, was talk to us about how you communicate in terms of how you find your inner circle. What do those conversations look like? And I think this is an example of what the conversations look like. And that's the advice I'd offer in looking for your inner circle. Your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your best friends, they need to be able to call you on your shit. Otherwise, you don't get any better.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Word for word, I was almost nodding along with everything you said there. Particularly just before I even go into this, the fat comment, because I would talk to a lot of people who aren't particularly pleased with their self-image and their body image, and they'll say something to me like, oh, my mother insinuated I'm heavy, or my mother insinuated I'm always dieting, or somebody insinuated I'm fat. And I'm just in the mindset of, is it potential that they didn't insinuate it anywhere near as venomous as you think? And you perceive that comment to be true because it's your reality. And regardless, only you can change that perception. So if you're going to change that, you're going to have to lean into it. Like you said, don't read, go and apply. For me, anyway, going back to your question, the conversations are almost straightforward yet really, really tricky. I speak with Orla a lot, without going into too much detail, almost just respect for the fact that she's not here. I'll always lean into uncomfortable conversations, and I'd encourage anybody to do it. Like me and Orla, similar to me and you, are two insanely different characters. Sometimes I don't know, and I don't say this to put myself down, I say it because it's true. Sometimes I don't know how someone of her personality can tolerate someone of mine. And I mean that in the simple sense of she's so organized and disciplined and everything has a place, and I'm such a scatterhead with what I consider to be non-essentials, which I don't justify. I'm working on it, because it's not fair to the other person. So it would be very easy, and I see this all the time, for Orla to go around bitching to everybody about me. You know, Paul never closes the press. Paul never puts his porridge back in the press. Paul puts his dirty socks, he doesn't close the wash basket. Why don't you tell me? Like, you know, why don't you sit down with me and in a moment make me uncomfortable and be like, you know, you never clean your socks. Why don't you do it? All of a sudden, I can decide whether or not I'm willing to change that habit based on your perception of how much it bothers you. And it sounds so tiny and so trivial, but I'm sure you see this all the time. Someone will say something to you once and maybe twice, and then they'll say it a third time. And I don't know about you, but I'll always say, look, are we talking about this to fix the problem, or are we having a bitch? Because I'm not really interested in having a petty bitch about somebody else. And very soon you'll find out what someone's agenda is, because they'll either keep going or they'll stop talking instantly. But that's on the trivial end. But it's the little things that start the wars. Like when you live with somebody, I always say, like myself and Orla, we're two 100% icons. So we're two 50% of that equation. Now, assuming I'm perfect in every way, which is not true, I'm aspiring to be 50% of a two-part equation that's super self-aware. I don't have that yet, because I have been with Orla for 4 years. I know couples that are together 70 years and don't talk to each other that nice. So it's a hard one. But I'm never, ever going to become the boyfriend that Orla needs or requires if I don't frequently ask her, in not so straight up questioning, what am I doing lately that pisses you off? What can I let go of that would benefit our relationship? And is it possible that one or both of us is being unreasonable with the conversation? So these are difficult things. They sound trivial in my opinion, but I think they're actually really, really difficult to have, because usually it involves somebody letting go of a perspective they have. I heard Orla recently say something like, she joked to me a couple of years back about the fact I always leave the same spoon at the same place because I'm going to use it in a couple of hours. Now, it's a silly theory, I know. But when she got mad at me about it one day, I said, babe, you have to realize it's like you're getting mad at a puppy who doesn't know what he's done wrong and still loves you a lot. You need to tell me in the moment. And since I said that to her, she's like, I get it. It's not a thing in your mind. Like, I always joke, and I was like, babe, do you think Fabregas would be better in the holding role or in the attacking role for Chelsea? And she's like, he's a midfielder. I don't give a shit. And I'm like, exactly. That's how I see household chores. And that's the kind of like compromise where I'll get a bit more organized and she gets a bit more understanding, to the point then we reach a mutual decision that works for the two of us. Because, you know, and I've said this to you several times, I would have had a very distorted image of relationships for a while before I got with Orla, thinking it's all one thing or another. And it's really, really changed since I started dating again, and I started putting myself into a situation where I'm like, okay, it's not just your selfish wants and needs anymore. There's two people, you're two very different characters. You're going to have to find a compromise. So some of the conversations sound super straightforward and trivial, but similar to me and you, when you'll tear me apart in the business sense and rip me a new one in a really good way, and Orla will do the same. And usually it's because you know that there's something in me I haven't addressed that would, take me further. And it's a wonderful thing to have in your life. But if you want to get that in, you have to give that out. I wrote in a daily email yesterday, very briefly, just, if you were to be on your work trail and you want a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you sit on the bus and you just scowl 20 or 30 times a day, that's 150 projections of kind of misery per week. How are you ever supposed to get the smile from a stranger that could change your life? Like, I mean, I joke about that, but I smiled at Orla once 4 years ago, and she's my girlfriend now. And I kind of half smiled at you, or you smiled at me in the changing room, which sounds super weird.
That does sound weird.
But we became good friends, and it changed the trajectory of my life and my focus. And as in, you in my opinion, you start by first and foremost thinking, don't speak in absolutes, and perhaps let go of your beliefs on almost everything. Never have an absolute statement or an absolute belief on anything, because you may be disproven, and if you've been disproven on anything, you can be disproven on everything. And second is just have difficult conversations. Like, be willing to, if someone has I'm not saying just take criticism willy-nilly from everyone. I mean, there's certain people I with the greatest of respect, I disregard it from. But if somebody has my best interest at heart and they're trying to give me something, and vice versa, I think it's a really empowering thing to do. But I think it's such an irony that communication is literally the one tool in the world that will solve most interpersonal problems. We crave it. We all crave love. We all crave affection. We all crave to be slim. We all crave to let go of a shitty habit that kind of eludes us. And the communication just seems to be the thing we struggle with the most. But your communication skill has increased since I've known you tenfold. Like, I'm sure on some level you absolutely agree that getting uncomfortable with conversations has been a game changer in your life.
Oh, massively, because it's something that we've talked about off air in several, more than several, I'd say 100 conversations at this stage, because I even put a section of this in my first book, The Fitness Mindset, about my incessant need of making mountains out of molehills for the reason of not having the uncomfortable conversation. And for me, it normally showed up in like anxiety and stress, where it was a self-imposed prison. The more I think about all the anxieties that I had or have or currently feel, I'm like, they're self-imposed prisons. And a lot of it comes from having a conversation that you need to have and just avoiding it. For me anyways, again, I can't speak for anybody else. But being able to, and this is going to sound weird, but being able to practice that with the likes of you, where you see how you're able to communicate clearly in an uncomfortable conversation, either with somebody else or with me, and you're like, okay, that's how I need to approach it. I need to not bury this, I need to approach it head on. And that, for anybody that's listening, and there's a lot of people listening, some people have issues with mental health, some people don't, and some people have serious anxiety, some people have serious worry, and they're constantly stressed out. And as someone that has largely came out the other side of that, we're different in that sense, where I had to do a lot of work. I had to read a lot. I had to apply a lot of different tools. I had to test out a lot of different strategies in order to kind of get my head to the place where it felt clear and that like monkey mind was kind of calmed down. And what a lot of it came out of was just right, this is what you're feeling uncomfortable about. This conversation with that person, go and have that. You know, it's one of the reasons I run every day. Like, I literally use that as an anchor for how I handle every situation I have in my life. Like, I fucking hate running. Like, hate it. And it's not, the more I do it, the more I fucking dislike it. Like, and it never gets any easier, but I do it every single day. And and there's days, man, I ran 13k this morning, and I ran 13k on Monday, 13k on Tuesday, and we're recording this on Wednesday, and I'm like, my legs are fucking sore. I was like, I don't want to run. I don't have any podcasts that I've saved to listen to. I'm like, bollocks, I just don't want to do it. But I was like, you know what, stop being a bitch. Just go and fucking do it. And that 13k today means more than the last 7 combined, because you did it on the day when you didn't want to do it. And they're the days that matter, because then when you have to have that conversation with somebody that you're like, I really don't want to have this conversation, you anchor that time when you were running and you're like, well, I didn't want to do that either, and I still did it. And that's what serves me. And again, we have different strategies and tactics that we use, but you know, that's been one that's really served me over the years. And then just getting used to having the conversation with the likes of you, and to be honest, just stealing the way you approach it. Like, you know, like I love Picasso's quote that good artists copy and great artists steal. And I just like steal what fucking Paul does. I'm like, that's a really good way to have that conversation. That's what I'm going to do.
That's hilarious. But I mean, like I say, I always go back to it, but it's like reciprocated almost satirically on more of a professional sense. But you talked there about difficult conversation. I think we touched on, we spoke privately, like for coffee last week, and you said something, and I found myself talking to, was it a phone company? I think it was the phone company the other day, and they asked me a question with something on my end, and I was about to tell a white lie. And I went, no, tell them the truth. Let them know that you're the wrong person in this one. Set yourself up for long-term, genuine internal success. Set your internal blueprint to always tell the truth so that you can never, ever be called out again. Not honestly, not because I think I'm any kind of saint or wonderful person by any means, but just more so because if you start to live by your own set of virtues all the time, nobody else can ever pull bad virtues out of you. Like, do you know when someone's really rude or really sharp to you, and you think you're this wonderful person? I've done this a million times when I was younger. But then someone gets rude, and then you decide you're going to be super rude and dicky in return. Like, that's fine, but now you're no longer living with those perfect virtues you say you're living by. So you're now living by theirs. So, like, we joked about it in the conversation last week, but the difficult conversation, I was asked a very difficult question by my phone company, and I was like, shit, you guys are right. You're right. And you know what? I'm just going to have to suck shit on this one. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, it's funny because I had that kind of I say catalyst moment, penny drop moment, where I was on that phone call. It was on a phone call with a phone company about, no, it wasn't a phone company. I can't remember who the fuck it was, electricity company. And I remember about 5-6 months ago, I came off the phone and I blatantly lied to them. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, that wasn't true. And you go into like a default mode where it feels like someone else is taking over and you've made up a story, you've justified a lie, and then it's not until you're like pause and reflect and you go, that's not true. Like, you just made up a fucking story there. That's not true at all. And I remember that was my moment where I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that again. I'm not doing that again. If that happens again, where I start trying to defend myself and going into automatic defense, first I need to ask myself, am I wrong in this situation? You know, assume that the other person knows something that you don't. But also nipping it early and giving yourself permission to be like, okay, I'm sorry, that wasn't true. You know, and that's really uncomfortable. I had that situation with a friend recently where we were having a conversation and it wasn't the truth, but I wasn't a lie, but I neglected to give all the information on, you know, a particular thing that she asked me. And about 10 minutes later, I'm like, do you know what? I didn't give you all the information there. I'm like, I'm sorry. I actually held back. You know, I don't feel very secure talking about this topic. You know, it's stuff that happened to me, you know, a long time ago. And I'm like, I don't feel very secure talking about this topic. I was like, it's something that's still a bit fresh at me and I haven't came to terms with it and I haven't dealt with it yet. And I'd rather if we didn't nitpick at it, because it's something that I don't feel confident speaking on just yet, because I don't feel secure enough to be able to have a hindsight perspective on, yeah, I've framed it now, so that was a positive thing. Her reaction was great. She was like, Jesus, I totally get that. Yeah, that's fine. But I remember thinking that when you're feeling defensive, and we all have our version of what we're defensive about, our childhood, words that have been said to us, somebody calling you fat, somebody calling you stupid, somebody calling you ugly, somebody questioning your intelligence. We all have triggers, and where we feel super defensive when because we feel like someone's attacking our character. A lot of the times they're not. It's people just attacking our opinion. They're attacking, I don't think that diet is right. And you're like, no, fuck no, vegan's best, or carnivore's best, or paleo's best. And it's kind of like a misprojection of your insecurity, because you've attached to something to give yourself a identity that you feel like, do you know what? I belong to this tribe. This is who I am. And you attach everything to that. And then as soon as someone questions that, or as soon as someone comes at it from an angle that's a different opinion to yours, you can get very defensive. And I've lived it so recently, where you're jumping into defense mode. And for anyone that does that, if you feel defensive because somebody's attacked you, your character, or your opinion, you got to ask yourself, why are you holding on to that? Sometimes, as you said, it's just letting go of that shit, because that's not who you are. And if it is, and it's something you're struggling with, such as certain things that I struggle with, you have to reframe it as a positive thing. Maybe those words are good for fuel for a fire. We talk about your client Steve, who uses the people who used to call him fat. He's like, no, I fucking use that. And he's down. How much weight's he down?
He's lost 80 pounds in 4.5 months, and he still quotes exactly what you said. He messaged me. He'll be thrilled we're shouting him out in the podcast, man. He'll be thrilled you just mentioned him. He quotes Brian Keane Fitness as, hold on to it and use it. And I was like, no, man, just let it go. And he was like, fuck letting it go. I'm using this as fuel. And I was like, oh, you're such a Brian Keane carbon copy, man. But he did. Every time he's tempted to be a lazy dick, he just uses being called, heavy as a, like, nope, fuck that. I'm going to be 90 kilos now instead of 155.
But that's so powerful. And the reason I love that we talked about this in random episode 2 and now again today is the fact that both approaches work. It's just finding what works for you. That letting go technique on, the stuff that I struggle with, my insecurities, as long as you're not projecting it, and taking that insecurity and being a complete twat to the world, as long as you're not projecting it and you have the right amount of fuel to use it as fire, fuck, man, I can't run through the fucking desert or do any of these fucking runs without tapping into that when I'm really struggling. That always pushes me in my last couple of kilometers when my legs are fucked, my lungs are burning. I'm like, remember the words, and you're bringing back all the people that were telling you couldn't do it or calling you stupid or didn't believe in you, and you're using that fuel for fire. As I said in the second episode 2, fire is powerful. It can light up your whole house, but it can also burn it down if you don't get it under control. So it's important to find out what works for you, because you may be better to do what Paul does. Talk us through your strategy, Paul. You're exceptional with this, where you're like, I'm a bit attached to this emotion or this feeling, just let it go. Talk me through your kind of thought process, or what it looks like from A to Z when something comes in that you're like, I feel a bit negative, or that's fucking eating at me. From that point to, no, I'm good, and you just fucking let it go.
It's a terrific question. And it's funny that you say using this as for fuel, for example, because I can't personally connect with that philosophy, though I admire it and I agree with it. So I've given bad advice in the past. It would have, if Steve wasn't a smart man, it would have been bad advice to tell him to let go, because that's not the way he wanted to use it. It's a bit nearly tricky for me to quote this off without sounding like I'm literally reading some random secret or Buddha book right now. But I'm a big believer that where there's no enemy within, the enemy without won't be able to get at you. And I've always believed this. I've not always been good at applying it. Not till I was around 25. I held on to a couple. It's insane. I put this on a blog before. I held on to a couple of negative comments from my teens. I can go right back to the moment and tell you that that's exactly when I started to, think negative self-talk. Believe negative self-crap that we all have. I'm nothing special on that front. So to me, it is just a genuine case of remembering that first and foremost, anything that's said to me only lands if it's a reflection of my own insecurity about myself, which is a big one. So if by it being able to let go of any attachment to anything negative, I can perspectivize all my problems. Like you talked about attachment. When I did briefly bodybuilding for a very brief period, I was attached to 5% body fat and being huge. And that's a bad thing to be attached to, because you won't always be 5% body fat and be huge. So if you can't get your head around not looking like that, then you're absolutely screwed. And I still think a lot of people have that kind of body insecurity in some shape, way, form, or whatever. So letting go of arbitrary body composition and focusing on health for me has been a big one. Letting go of people's opinion to the point where I will absolutely accept some people may not like me and some people will like me and some people will offer me input, but never letting that dictate my actions more than myself. Like I'd rather care a hair more about myself than what anybody else thinks of me, because I just don't think it's incredibly practical to let a million other opinions think for you, precisely when ironically you can only control your one opinion. I also think as I just get a little bit older, nothing I've ever worried about in life in the past has come true. You know, I thought life was over when I dropped out of college at 20. I swear, I literally thought life was over. I thought, shit, I'm done, I'm out. And, you know, now I feel like I'm just getting started. So because of all of those little philosophies, and like I've listened to Buddha's Brain, that book, and it did nothing for me. I listened to the book Letting Go, which I say a lot, and that was the last little bit I needed. You know, books come into your life at a time. I just feel that there's nothing anybody could say to or about me that I haven't probably felt about myself and made peace with. So for me, it's just about trying to remain as calm and as present and as serene as possible, because otherwise I'm just going to end up projecting out this anxiety. I don't have a drive like you to run 10,000 miles through fire. Um, so that's another thing that I recognize in myself. Like, you know, I've broken both arms badly. I'm not going to be Mr. Olympia, anything like that. So I need to get very comfortable knowing my limitations. And finally, and I will just say this because you'll agree, like adversities happen. Like I actually personally think, which is might sound a bit weird, I'm trying to get back strong again in spite of having, you know, osteoporosis, bad arms, dislocated shoulders. But adversities happen, and they're trying to teach you to become a person that you need to be to get past this, or else you're not going to get past it. I actually personally think it's a degree of almost ignorant arrogance, which might sound a bit bad, that shit shouldn't be a bit difficult for you, or that you shouldn't have to make peace with something negative in order to get what you want, because like having something worthwhile is not an easy thing to have. And if you actually want it, like I wouldn't listen to your words in a million years. I'd pay close attention to your actions. So I just really, really respect when people are nice, when they don't, where they don't project out anxiety, or not anxiety, wrong word, like misery or negativity, where they just get on with it. Like they accept that some of us are just dealt with certain hands in life, and they work hard to just be a more better, sharper version of themselves. So I'm just able to let go of everything that is just not serving whatsoever and perspectivize everything as largely irrelevant. Considering I'll have kids one day and I'll be on my deathbed, nothing else matters compared to that. And then on the flip side, I just respect that on the other end, there is people like you that are, and Steve, as you mentioned, that are hold on to this, use it, you know, get stronger in the face of it, where I'm just pushing it away. I'm like, do you know what? Get the fuck out of my life. And that's just what works for me. That's just literally what works for me. But there's elements of my approach that maybe you might take, but not all of them. And there's definitely elements of your approach that I would take, but certainly not all of them. So if you're listening to this, like Brian said, I think it's a real shame to be a prisoner to other people's opinions and to other people's words, unless you plan on doing something with that, getting stronger in the face of it. So you need to see, is it the letting go approach? Or is it the, you know, set a fire in your belly and go at it relentlessly anyway? Because it's ultimately, when it's all said and done and we look back on life, honestly, Sally's opinion of how you lived your life when you were 28, I sound like a Gary Vee quote there, but honestly, Sally's opinion of how you looked, or your Instagram page, or your comments, or your picture, or your selfie, when you actually think about the disproportionate attention people give that versus like, you know, something grave, it doesn't even beg thinking about for me. So, you know, it's all going south. We're all getting old. We're all going to die. Might as well just have a little bit more fun and relaxation while we're here.
Yeah, it's the biggest. I think if I was to personally handpick the one decision, and I'll say it's a decision because it was something that I had to make a choice on, that it was to no longer make decisions based out of other people's opinions. And it's funny you said 25, that, you know, when you started to kind of change your perspective on things, I was very similar. I'm 31 now. But when I was 24, 25, it was when I started to compete in bodybuilding and fitness modeling first, because that was the first time that I'd ever done something outside of the norm that wasn't what my friends or family had ever seen me do, which coincided with me starting a business. They were related in the sense of one was to feed into the other and vice versa. And it was at that time that I was really struggling with the criticisms and the opinions, and realizing, and this is something that still fucking irks me to this day, so I obviously haven't completely dealt with it because it wouldn't trigger me so much if it did, is people taking advice from people who you wouldn't change fucking positions with. You know, I was listening to people when I would ask them, well, should I start my own business? I was talking to people who hated their fucking job, who are 40 or 50 years working and are about to retire and delighted for it. They're like, you shouldn't start your own business. That's risky. That's a bad move. You shouldn't do it. And not realizing that you wouldn't have fucking changed positions with those people anyway. You know, it's like listening to, this sounds ludicrous, but some of us fucking do it, where we ask our overweight friend for advice on our diet. Like, why the fuck would you ask somebody who's 3 stone overweight what you should be eating for breakfast? Like, you wouldn't change positions with them. It's fucking ludicrous. But we do it. Like, I did it so long. I used to do it, this fucking still irks me because I wrote about it recently, so it's a bit fresher, where I would ask my friends in college about anytime I'd bring a new girl home, if I want, because I wanted a girlfriend, you know, in my early 20s. I was starting to settle down a small bit in the sense of I wasn't going out as often, and I would bring home any girl I was seeing, and the guys I was hanging out with would completely find everything out that was wrong with her. They would point out that her fucking hair was too short or her hips were too big or whatever, and I'm like, oh yeah, shit, they are. And I was asking for advice on what I should do from people who were in the same fucking position as me or worse. And when I think back on that, it irritates me so much because I was literally making decisions based out of other people's opinions, and worse, I was making decisions off other people's opinions who I wouldn't have switched positions with. Like, one of the reasons I come to you for relationship advice is that because I'm like, well, I wanted to have a version of what Paul has. You know, he shows up well, Orla respects him, Orla loves him. I'm like, okay, Paul, what should I do here to show up better in this relationship? And, you know, you do the same thing with me when it comes to business. It's like, okay, what do I have to do to get my business to this level? Take advice from people who you'd switch fucking position with. Like, not the fucking 3 stone overweight person who you're asking breakfast advice for down the road. Fuck's sake. Like, oh, that's something that really irks me. I just wanted to, I don't know why that irks me so much. I need to let that shit go. No, but it's a bit fresh.
I agree with you. I had it recently, just before I went to Barcelona. I was eating a fruit salad, one of those Dunn's fruit salads, like literally in probably the best condition of my life, and or near enough. And she says, oh, she didn't even ask. She just like, oh, all the sugar in that melon would make you a bit fat. And I was like, love, you are overweight, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I didn't say this to her. I was just thinking, yeah, whatever. But like, just you're listening to someone going, if I was weaker in character, I could listen to that shit. I was like, I'm fine. Like, I'm good. Go away. Stop giving me unsolicited advice. And I agree with you. Taking advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. You've actually said that quite a lot. Is something that I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with. You kind of have to earn the right to. You kind of have to earn the respect to give a little bit of advice in many respects.
Yeah, I agree. And you said the weaker character. And this is something that's been coming up quite a lot, kind of my own self in terms of thinking. Particularly, it comes up a lot with training when I'm really physically pushing myself. And I haven't spoken about this in the podcast in the past, about weaker character and accepting the fact that you say it all the time. You're like, I'm weak and pathetic. I'm like, tell me my flaws and let me fix it. And I think that's something I've been coming to terms with recently. I did a very popular episode towards the back end of last year called 8 Critical Habits to Building Mental Toughness. And one of the things that I always try and make sure that I break down the misconception is people look at, and I'll use myself because you're your own best example, even though I hate using myself when there's other examples out there. But in this context, I can give proper reference because I'm living it, where people are like, well, it's okay for you, you're mentally strong. I'm like, I'm mentally strong because I was mentally weak. I'm like, I'm literally I have self-discipline because I was undisciplined. I had to find ways to build that because I was fucking worthless. I had a weak character. I was letting other people's opinions dictate what I did. I couldn't make decisions on my own. I couldn't own my own fucking shit. I was blaming everybody else and making excuses. The reason that I live the way that I live now and do the things I do now is because I was such a fucking loser and blaming the whole world for everything else that was wrong. And the first steps with that came from taking responsibility first, and then building the tools and techniques and strategies like running every day, like getting up early. And I'm not saying people listening, you've got to go run every day. It's relative. You might just need to go for a walk around the block at the end of the day when you know you're going to be tired. Or you may need to prepare your meals the day before because you know you're going to reach for the biscuits and chocolates at lunchtime tomorrow if you don't have any food at you. It's relative. But owning it, just take responsibility for it. And I never, ever want anybody to listen and go, it's okay for Brian or Paul. They're strong. They're mentally strong. They're self-disciplined. It's built. You know, I can't speak for everybody else. I can only speak for myself. I had to fucking build it because I was such a fucking loser and I was so weak. And you know, I didn't do anything till I was fucking 25 because I was so worried what everybody would think. And I was so worried that starting my own business, yeah, what if you fail? So what? What if you fail? Then at least you fucking know something that you did it and you tried and it didn't work. At least you know that. Like literally, you have direct feedback on, well, that way doesn't work. Now you decide, is that what you really want to do? Do you want to map your actions to your ambition and change it? Or do you want to change direction because your ladder's up against the wrong wall? You make the decision off that. Not trying is fucking losing. Not trying is weak. And not taking the chance, not approaching the girl, not going to the gym, not going to the trainer. That's fucking loser talk. That's the stuff that's going to hold you back, not the going for it and failing. And that comes down to weak character. And you can make all the excuses of having the shit bet out of you when you were young, or having this fucking relationship go bad, or having this boss fucking be mean to you, or this person call you names, or bully you and beat the shit out of you when you were younger. Yes, they're all fucking excuses. You can use that. They all happened. They may be facts. But what you do with them, you can't change the cards you were dealt, but you can choose how to play the hand. And that is a choice. That's a decision. And that comes from owning the fact that if you're mentally weak and you're not where you want to be in terms of the discipline in some area of your life, take responsibility for that, because when you own it, you can control it. And when you control it, you can change it. Otherwise, nothing changes.
Oh man, 100%. It's actually been quite a frequent conversation. I'll talk to someone overweight that's clearly got a series of bad habits, and they'll genuinely think that their mother's cooking or their boyfriend's habits are the reason they're fat. And very often there's two things I'll try and get somebody to do. I'll try and get them to, can't even think of the word, God help me. I'll try and basically get them to admit that they're not taking ownership. And once they take responsibility, once you're like, I'm fat because, I'm broke because, I'm unhappy because, it's on me, you can 100% change something. I completely agree with it. Once you begin to take ownership and take responsibility, that's the only time you can ever fix something. But sadly, a lot of people do go through life and they won't lean into the discomfort. Like, I know some people that will message me because they know I'm not massively naturally super confident in terms of putting myself out there, but they're like, I love how you put your pull-ups on the stories, even though you might fall and might not be able to do one. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just leaning into that insecurity. Like, I probably look a little bit stupid. I'm probably slightly weaker than I should be. I'm a personal trainer. I should probably be seen to be, stronger and more put together, but I can't take a ski trip without breaking something. But I take responsibility for the fact that if I need to become the person I want to be, I need to lean into the discomfort just a touch. And a lot of people get this misconstrued where it's like, I'll wait for life to quieten down, then I'll start being slim. I'll wait to be more confident, then I'll start putting up an Instagram story. And people get it so the opposite way. I wish people could nearly see what I saw in terms of my own, but particularly your stuff, because you set the blueprint for me in many respects of starting a business. When I saw the 5 a.m. trips, we both done the 5 a.m. trips to the gym in the Toyota Yaris to take our first client for free, and built up accordingly from there. And it wasn't until you're able to take personal responsibility. If this fails, it's on me, but I can change that. I couldn't agree more. And I'm trying to encourage so many people I talk to on the daily to stop putting blame elsewhere, because until you do that, if you carry any kind of the victim mentality, and I do joke, I call myself pathetic and useless, and I'll say it to some people like, oh, don't put yourself down. And these are the same people that if I said, well, no, because I think I'm strong here and here, they'd be like, geez, you're very full of yourself, aren't you? And I'd be like, fuck off, love. I joke about being chaotic, flawed and useless because natural proclivity towards laziness, towards procrastination. I don't want to exercise. I'd rather eat shit too. I know that how many habits have been identified to me before that I've been able to change, and thus have a slightly better foresight for the future. How much have you been in confirmation bias in the past, where you've only looked to have something you believe confirmed by somebody who thinks the exact same, and never once challenged everything you believe? So I joke about being chaotic and flawed and useless, because if the philosophy has to work in the worst possible scenario, if that makes sense, like the taking responsibility and being a better person and recognizing that only you can control it, and that you can definitely get slim or get richer or whatever, can only work in the worst possible scenario. That's why I'm like, yeah, I'm chaotic, I'm useless, I'm an idiot, but if I can find a woman to love me and have a job I don't mind that much, anyone can do it. But you have to lean into the discomfort first and take responsibility and take ownership. That's something that me and you are massively on. I think when we speak to each other face to face over coffee, I can see that fire get lit up in the both of us, just in aspects of life where it's like, yeah, 10% more tomorrow and my life would be better. And I didn't do that 10% today. I just think it's huge, man.
Yeah, but it's owning it. It's holding yourself to your standard. I'm a big believer in working to your potential and not to your quota. That you know what your potential is that you can work to, and you can make a justification to. And I know myself. I've got a list of things where I draw up my to-do list every day, the things that I'm going to do every day. And if I come to the end of the day, I'm like, I didn't do that. And it wasn't at the expense of enhancing another area of my life, because I've become a lot more flexible over the years. Holly's really taught me this, because I was very rigid before she was born, and not detrimentally so, but I didn't like when things changed. I liked when things went to plan, and I wasn't as flexible in my approach. And I normally have a to-do list of the things that I want to have achieved that day, record a podcast, write a section of the book, do an interview, whatever it is. And I know myself, at the end of the day, if I haven't done it because I was lazy or I was tired or I wasn't tuned in or I wasn't focused, I need to own that and be like, okay, don't get it wrong tomorrow. This is the thing I see with diets all the time, where people get their one meal wrong and then they throw the whole day off, or they have a bad breakfast on Saturday and the whole weekend is out. It's the figurative getting a flat tire and then slicing the other three. I'm aware of that when I set my to-do list on what I need to achieve that day. I also don't beat myself up over it anymore, where I'm like, okay, get tomorrow right, and be flexible in the approach. I don't know, we've spoken about this. I don't think we've spoken about this together on the podcast, like how I break my life into the 4 quadrants: health, wealth, love, and fulfillment. Health, my physical health, my mental health; wealth, my bank account; my love, my personal relationships, romantic relationships, familial relationships; and my fulfillment, podcasts, books, the things that make me tap dance to work. And I intentionally have to use that metric and scoring metric, because I can get out of balance if I don't, where I can go all health. We've both fucking done this, where it's like gym. And it's like fucking 4 hours a day of training and broccoli and chicken to get jacked for a show. But relationships take a hit, and your bank account takes a hit, and your fulfillment takes a hit because you're being selfish and not serving anybody else. And I have to use that success metric personally to pull myself back. And I think not beating yourself up when you don't hit it is big. You mentioned procrastination there as well, Paul. I'm curious, because I'm a master procrastinator and it's something I've ironed out over the years, so now it's not as habitual. What were your steps in terms of getting more done, in the sense of not procrastinating? Do you make out a list similar to me each day? Do you put it on your phone? Do you just have an idea of what you want to do? How did you kind of overcome the procrastination, and how do you set out and achieve the things that you do every day? And this can be in all areas. This can be your fitness, this can be your work, this can be your relationships. How do you tend to approach that?
I'd be lying to your audience if I said I had sorted my procrastination to a fine art, that's for sure. In terms of your 4 quadrants, I think they're exceptional. And you're so right about going to the gym and papering over other cracks, because, say, when I was gym obsessed back in the day, my relationship life would have taken a hit. And that's naturally not something I struggle with. I had a long-term girlfriend before, or for 6 years, or 7 years it was. But wealth is something that I've always struggled to believe that people need more than their means. And I don't like the fact I think that, but it's my natural go-to. I've always struggled to think that people get greedy and people don't need more than their means. Now that's not true. That is not true. That's a perspective that I hold, and I'm aware of that. Because you're super wealthy billionaire, it doesn't make you any more wrong, like for me thinking that way. So that's something I need to actively work on. So by neglecting one area of your life, you could actually be neglecting it massively for the future. And I'm aware I'll have a wife and kids one day, and I need to completely reframe that blueprint, which I'm actively doing, very much so. In terms of a to-do list, I don't have a massive I try to get past procrastination with a to-do list. I did get this directly from you. A to-do list is key, and I put my paramount tasks first. So online check-ins and daily emails each day, because I work mostly through WhatsApp, are done first thing in the morning without question. PT clients are my next thing I focus on without question. That's the bread and butter. That brings in my wages. That's how people are going to talk about and to me. That's how my business will run or die. So they're the things that matter. Then, believe it or not, my next priority is about a half an hour of Spanish lessons every day. Estoy aprendiendo español, and I love it because that's a lovely little side goal to focus on. That's just for me. It makes no difference to anybody else. I just feel a little bit more comfortable. And then the rest of the to-do list, I'm not on your level, and I want to be, in terms of podcasting and blogging and writing and making sure that certain things get done. Now, you said something, and it shows about taking a lot from every conversation. You just said about being a little bit kinder and a bit more flexible to yourself. I tell clients every day of my life, don't press the fuck it button. Basically, if you're going to use a concept I call the fuck it button, use it wisely. It's perfectly acceptable, in my opinion, to go out and get smashed with the girls or the lads on Saturday night if that's what you want to do. But don't press the fuck it button on Tuesday because you've had a bad day and you're going to feel worse about yourself. And that's the work professional equivalent is, I didn't record a podcast today. I think I'll just wait till Monday. I'll take the weekend off and I'll just wait till Monday. That's my work version of the fuck it button. I'm like, no, you're tired today. Rest today. Get at it tomorrow. In 1 week's time, you'll be the average of the other 6.5 days. You won't be the 2 perfect days and the 5 write-offs. That's funny because you just brought that and surfaced it back to the front of my brain by just saying that. By your own increased flexibility, that's affected me. So having a to-do list for me, has definitely changed the trajectory of my life, because what did you say? Eat the frog on yesterday's Instagram story?
Yeah, the Mark Twain, eat the frog,
Yeah, so for me, it's not a case of so much eating the frog in terms of like I am doing all my own check-ins to WhatsApp personally, but it's a case of doing what has to be done first thing in the morning, regardless of what mood I'm in, because that's what brings in my wage. And then everything else is a bit more, the bottom of the list. The 2 things at the bottom of the list don't have to get done. It's like the 2 things that must get done, the 2 things I should get done, and then the 2 things that if I can get done, fantastic, and if I don't, no biggie. Content, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that, Mark, just for anyone that's unfamiliar with that phrase that may not be following my Instagram stories, by my daily Q&A is Monday to Friday. The Mark Twain quote is that if you eat a frog, it says eat the frog. If you eat a frog first thing in the morning, the rest of the day is only going to get better, which effectively means do your task that is either the highest priority task or the thing that you don't really want to do, and do it in the morning when your willpower is at its highest and when you're at your freshest. I live by that. I always do either my creative work, which is normally podcasting, particularly solo episodes, or writing first thing in the morning when I'm creative, or I do my Eat the Frog task, which is like emails and converting PDF files and shit that I'm just like, I should outsource all of this if I could. Some of it you can't, but I just do it in the morning. We all have our versions of that. That's Eat the Frog is something I used to always say to clients that hated training, because most people tend to fall into either one of 2 brackets, that they work out because they know they should and they know it's good for their health, or they want to look a certain way, and that vision that they're holding in their mind of how they want to look is worth the pain of the workouts. And then you've got people on the other side who love to train, who love to work out, that have reframed the discomfort of training as a positive thing because the endorphin rush you're going to get afterwards. I fall into the latter. I love working out. I'll train till the day I die. But people tend to fall into 2 brackets, and those listening will be in that. And that Eat the Frog works very well for working out for people who dislike it. The reason I run in the morning is because I will not run at 4 or 5 p.m. If I really had to and suck it up, I can kind of I can get the self-control and the discipline and the self-talk to get myself going, but I know that it's way easier to do it in the morning when I'm fresher. So I do it when I'm fresh like that, because that compounds over time. I know realistically, I'm realistic. You're not fucking superhuman. When you have a bit of self-awareness on what you like and what you're good at, I know that realistically I'm not going to go for a run at 5 p.m. every day. I just know I don't like running enough, and I'm going to get tired. The day will get ahead of me. I'll find an excuse, and I might do it 1 or 2 days, but I'm not going to be able to do that 5 days a week. But I can do it in the morning when I'm fresh, and I know I can do it consistently, and that's what compounds over time. That's just asking the right questions, and using the things like the frog strategy, if that works for you. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true, because you'd almost underestimate, or bear with me here. There's something, certainly you seem to have it down with your morning strategy. It's still something that I have to really do, but there's something that I, and probably maybe someone listening to this, could do tomorrow, that they would do, that would yield tremendously massive results in the grand course of the next 6 months. But because the results don't yield big enough tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day, people won't do it, which I fully understand in that respect. But like something as trivial as an overweight person counting calories, like they do it for the next week, which is going to be difficult and tricky and not easy. You won't look any different in a week. But unfortunately, the alternative is having the same horseshit bullshit how do I lose body fat conversation in 6 months or in 12 months, and constantly being anxious about every party and not being able to wear clothing you want. And I think there's an irony, because just putting it out there in case anybody's listening, I could listen to you doing your crazy runs and it doesn't land with me until I stop and think, well, he didn't just run 20 kilometers, he had to build up with a 1K. I need to discipline himself to do a 1K and then a 2K and then a 5K and then a 10K. And all of a sudden he completely rewired his thought process, that it becomes the norm and mental character is built. And you started by doing something that probably had no specific returns tomorrow, but then it built over time. It's a little bit like, if you've ever heard the Jocko and Jordan Peterson podcast, they have a line that still sticks with me to this day that I'm trying to encourage clients of mine to do, that if you stand up straight with your shoulders back and believe it, you begin to actually change your physiology. But if you do the opposite and you slouch and you cower and you retreat inside yourself, you begin to change the physiology towards negativity and self-negativity and whatnot. And I'm very intrigued by that, because sometimes you don't necessarily need the scientific knowledge to understand that anytime I stand up straight on my shoulder, do something smart in the morning, I begin to feel a lot more confident in myself.
Yeah, and it's
and confident you decide to be one day. You have to build it.
Yeah, that's actually something I'd like to talk on, because confidence is something that comes up quite a lot on my channels in different forms from different people, because all of us are confident in certain things and not that confident in other things. What is or do you have a tool, tactic, or strategy for building confidence, or when you're entering into something new that you're afraid of, that you pull from previous situations where you felt similar in order to try and project future confidence into the situation that you're facing now? Or do you have any tips for building confidence in general?
Great question. I'm definitely throwing this one back at you, because I think we'd have good answers on this. I find when I competed in bodybuilding that time, it's definitely been the most scared I've ever been in my life. And I wanted to pull out of the show on that day, and you didn't let me, and I ended up doing really well and placing. And I had a really skewed image of, this is true, like I'm not just narrative fallacying this. This is absolutely true. I had a really skewed image that I didn't look ready, and in truth, I couldn't have done anymore. So my rational voice was trying to talk me out of it, because for whatever reason, I think it comes down to anytime I'd set a goal in the past, I never followed through in it. School, sucked balls. College, dropped out. Get a better job, never went through with it. Took an air traffic controller test, believe it or not, a few years back, and I didn't go through with it either. So every goal I'd set myself, I never followed through. And I believe you start to really, really believe that as your blueprint. And I would have done the same with men's physique had you not pushed me. But because nobody's going to really relate to that, something people might relate a bit more to is the social media. I set up a business page. Probably the next scariest moment I've ever done in my life. What will people think? People are going to laugh at me. People are going to think I'm an idiot. Imposter syndrome. People will think I'm a bell end. When I walk down to my local gym, people will laugh. And it didn't happen that way. I tried it. I started to use my strength and write what I consider to be helpful content, people started to engage. All of a sudden, people that wanted to be in my life drifted more towards me because of what I admitted. People that maybe didn't like me or were indifferent to me started to go away, which is a blessing when you think about it. And I started to do things like listen to helpful content, pull your shoulder blades back. I've spent more time with people who talk positive, and I actually just genuinely began to realize that the bar is constantly moving in terms of building achievements or building confidence. And what you set out to do 3 years ago is trivial compared to now, but there'll always be an element of fear to anything worth having. But it's a hard one. It's great advice to offer, but people have to lean into it, because you can tell, in my opinion, when you're talking to someone who wants to build confidence, but they have the mindset gone reverse. I'd love to do this, but I'm going to wait a little bit longer till I get confident. And I'm thinking, no, you need to stretch yourself a little bit. If you're afraid of public speaking, don't go do a 300 people speech. Ask 5 of your friends to sit around while you practice and feel like a twat. That's what I would do. That's what I have done. What about you? What's your best strategy for building up confidence? Because that's all I got, really.
Yeah, it's very similar in the sense that you mentioned like small steps are always the biggest. Like you gave the example even of when I was running, because you probably remember when I was training for Marathon des Sables, when I did my first 2K and nearly got sick in the fucking warehouse gym. And after doing 2K and then, 9 months later, I ran 250K through the Sahara. But that first 2K nearly killed me. And I remember at the moment thinking, fuck, how am I going to do another 248K? I'm just after getting sick after 2K. And the reason that I got so much from, say, the Sahara and running through, 250 kilometers through the desert was because there were so many areas of my life that I did that, where I overthought the situation and worried about it, perceived worries, things that weren't real problems, and I looked at it, at the whole picture, as opposed to breaking it down into small chunks. I love and very much prescribed the idea of how do you eat an elephant, bite by bite. Like you break big goals down into their simpler tasks, and then you start asking better questions about how do I achieve this? Like I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to run 6 back-to-back marathons unless I was able to run 1 marathon. So I was like, okay, I need to design my training so that I'm able to run a marathon. So I started running to 5K, and then I went to 10K, and then I went to 20K, and then I ran a marathon, which is 42K. And I'm like, okay, that's pyramid of prioritization. That's one thing that I've done. And as you break down goals into their smaller steps and you start to hit them, confidence comes with that. I always picture, the analogy I use is like legs on a table. And I still use this to this day because it's the visual. I'm very visual in my approach to things. One of the reasons that I remember so many quotes, I'm very visual and kind of see things in my mind. And, a big believer, if you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. But I see things in my mind that allow me to anchor perceived weaknesses so that I can make them strengths going forward. And I have to picture a blank table with, a couple of legs. And every time, if my end goal was 250 kilometers to the Sahara, I'm like, right, those tables and the legs of those tables, I need to do 2 kilometers first and then go to 5 kilometers and then go to 10 kilometers. And every time I'd hit a new goal that was smaller than the 250K, it was adding a small leg to that table. And then as a result, I got more confident with that thing I was trying to achieve. And I still apply that approach to when I'm doing things now that I'm scared of, like things that terrify me, like we've had that discussion that my area of weakness has always been like romantic relationships, where I'd overthink an entire situation, and it's not about overthinking all the things that could go wrong, because I get it. I have to use that reference point because I still have those weaknesses and those perceived thoughts of, oh, what if it goes wrong? Not realizing that, no, you focus on this step. You focus on getting this thing right. You focus on showing up the right way right now. You focus on date, or you focus on workout, or you focus on meal. Like, it's not about the whole picture. Yes, keep that in mind, and it's important. And it's important to think about past, Rob Lipsett was on the podcast recently, and he made a really good point about, learn from the past, live in the present, and think about the future. And when you get that balance right, that can help you build confidence, particularly if your past is other success points and success areas that you're using as reference points for now because of the fear you're feeling in this given situation. You did it with, I remember when you were stepping on stage in a bodybuilding show, and some people will resonate with that, other people will have their version of that. You know, it might have been stepping up to speak in front of their boss, or, you know, at a public talk, or something that they were afraid of. But when you have something new that you're afraid of, like you setting up your Facebook page, I remember you were thinking about, well, I was also terrified to step up on stage in bodybuilding, and you used a past success as a way to deal with potential current fear. And every time you do that, you get more confident. And the bigger the goal, or the bigger the fear, this is what I found personally, the bigger the fear, the more confidence that comes from it. Like, I came back from Marathon des Sables, 250k through the Sahara, and I felt fucking invincible. Paul, I was terrified before I flew out. Like, I have a section in the book that I'm writing. I literally made a quote. I actually haven't posted this on social media, but it's in the book that I wrote 3 days before I flew out. And it was just like this self-talk about me freaking out. And I'm like, just captured, because I capture my thoughts. Either I write them in notes on my phone, or I write them in a journal, and I just capture my thoughts. If my head, my monkey mind is going fucking crazy, I just get all those thoughts out onto a piece of paper or out onto notes on my phone, and it just helps me clarify. But I was fucking terrified. Not so much from the run and the distance, because I was in physically good shape, but I am petrified of snakes. Like, still to this day, fucking terrified. And when you're running through the Sahara, you have to have your venom pump within arm's reach at all times, because in case a snake bites you, you know. And I was having dreams for 2 weeks beforehand of snakes, like. And the fear was, like, if you had given me an out, like a pliable out, that was like legit reason, I'd have fucking jumped on it. You know, I probably wouldn't have. Realistically, I knew I had to do it, but the temptation was so great that if someone gave me an out, I would have felt like taking it. And as a result of getting through that and coming out the other side, you become unstoppable and you feel invincible. And I don't want to say that for people to disconnect, because you don't have to run to the Sahara to get that. It's the proportion of the thing that you're afraid of that you lean into and attack. When you come out the other side, success or not, the fact that you've even attacked it will give you confidence. Like, that's the misconception. People think that confidence comes from doing well. Confidence doesn't come from doing well. Confidence comes from attacking the thing you're afraid of, whether you do well or not. It's not about the outcome, it's about the process. And when you attack those fears and do that consistently, you build confidence from that, not from succeeding, not from external outcomes of what you deem success. That's not how it works. And I had this fucked up misconception that I would be, you know, more confident when I set and hit this goal. It's like, no, you become more confident when you're afraid of something and you start attacking it. That's how you get more confident. And that's relative. That might be at the fear of stepping into a gym for the first time, or the fear of going to a personal trainer, or the fear of asking your boss for that raise, or the fear of going for a new job that you truly want, or the fear of approaching that guy or girl you like. It's that fucking fear that gives you confidence, and attacking that and getting into a habit of doing that consistently builds up so much confidence over time.
Oh, 1,000,000%. I actually even thought of an even probably more applicable example as you were speaking there, dude, because you're so right about leaning into the fear, because it's never as bad as we I always joke with Orla going, nothing is as good as we anticipate or as bad as we fear. I think it goes for everything. But for yesterday, a great example on my story, like for anyone who might not know who the hell I am on this podcast, I dislocated my shoulder in February last year after years of problems. I thought it was over the hill. That's both shoulders gone now. So I was skiing, fell down a mountain, dislocated my shoulder in February. And then by June, again, I just decided, you know, it's time for a bit of a transformation again, get a little bit leaner, drop some body fat, got fairly into great shape again. And then in October, trying calisthenics again, I went into shoulder extension and I dislocated my shoulder again. Genuinely crippled arthritis, couldn't do with surgery, there's a big tear, etc., etc. This is not a pity party, I promise. But I just want to give a bit of context. Yesterday, I was going to do a chest press, floor press. I put it on my Instagram story. I was petrified. Probably the most scared I've been in a couple of years. I thought, okay, there's one of two ways. But I tried it. I was like, this has to go well. If I get really scared, I won't do it anymore. So I did 6 reps. And during each rep, it felt glacially slow. It felt like global warming happens quicker. And I pushed up, felt like my arm was going to fall off. Every time I went down, felt like it was going to come out, fall off. I recorded it, I watched it back, and it looked perfect. It was just up, down, smooth, controlled, happy out. And I was like, holy crap, that psychological mind frame, me seeing that back now has me got the confidence to go in there the next day and try the same weight or slightly heavier without the irrational fear I had of not trying. And there'll be a period of time in the summer or next year where I won't probably be ever physically as strong as I could be. I won't be able to take my physique as far as it could. But similar to last summer when I lived in Spain and I was training my best and eating well, and I would have a couple of people come over to me in the gym asking for advice, they'd actually be quite shocked that I had dislocated my shoulder. And I'd be like, look, I go to the point of tolerable pain and no further. And just because I can't do a press anymore doesn't mean I can't still work my back, arms, legs, and six pack and look somewhat decent as opposed to, the fuck it button altogether. And to me, that builds confidence because I've taken a situation less than ideal, arthritis, osteoporosis, 2 dislocated shoulders, 1 that requires surgery, and I still managed to keep myself lean and healthy in spite of that. And it's a really empowering mindset to have, to think that, you know what, you can play me with any cards, but unless you cut my limbs off, I'm just going to get past it. And it's a mindset I encourage most people to go to. Go to the point of tolerable pain and probably no further, just because I don't want to be irresponsible, because life is going to throw you so many things to try and stunt your confidence. And I am less confident when I don't feel good about myself. Like, I don't get attached to body image, but that doesn't mean I go unattached completely. I have a certain level that I feel and look great at and I'm happy at, and I like to be in control of. And I know that when I can be like, okay, there's a tear on the front of your shoulder. Don't press in this plane, but pull in this plane, squat in this plane. You'll be fine. Get over it. And then eventually you'll start trying push-ups, and eventually you'll start trying bench press. And for me, it's a nice little reminder. This is what clients are going through. Like, I'm past the fear of walking into a gym, but if you're listening to this, I'm not past the fear of picking up a set of 20s and thinking I might not be leaving there with an injury or looking like an absolute knob. So I'm only building confidence in that plane by trying. Confidence, trying. I'll go down tomorrow, try again. I'll go down tomorrow, try again. And I would urge anybody who's in a similar position to me in terms of, the situation's less than perfect. I'm like, yeah, welcome to life. Please try and get on with it. So
I think that is a misconception that we have, and I definitely had in certain areas of my life, of the, I always joke on my channel of the I'll be happy when fallacy. I'll be happy when I have, this job, or I'll be happy when I make this amount of money, or I'll be happy when I have this external thing. That you're constantly living in the future of this, chasing this dragon that doesn't really exist. And life is never perfect. Like, it's never the right time to do something, and I'm very fortunate. Again, I always bring it back to my daughter Holly. She was my catalyst, as we spoke earlier about my rigidity and my increased flexibility since she's came along. But she was the catalyst for, like, fuck, no one's ready to have a kid, ever. I think that's anyone that's ever like, yeah, I'm ready to have a kid. I'm like, nah, you're probably not. Or else I'm projecting. Like, I totally wasn't, but that was my second biggest fear. It's funny because the 2 things in my life that I was the most scared of, and one was the Sahara because of the snakes and all the things that could go wrong, potentially dying, like all the things that could go wrong. I was terrified. But the second one was my daughter being born. It was Holly being born. I was terrified before she was born, because you don't know. Like, we had this conversation before, even when she was born and when she was really young, because I had this ill perceived view of certain women and how I was always afraid. You hear the joke on daddy issues, that girls that potentially don't, again, I don't like generalizing, but girls that may not turn out right, or the large proportion of girls that don't turn out right, or girls that have issues with their dad. I'm like, fuck. I'm like, what if that's me? I'm like, what if she doesn't turn out right because I can't be a good dad? And all these fears just would circulate in my head. Like, they kept me awake at night. I was terrified because you didn't know were you going to be good enough. You didn't know if anything goes wrong in her life, is it your fault? Which, you're putting external blame onto yourself because of the way that I perceived that, if you're not again, back to my own misconceptions of the world in terms of the daddy issue joke. You know, we watch way too much Family Guy to not have the daddy issue joke, like, because of, you know, there's always reference on satirical shows like that about, you know, girls that turn out a certain way and their dads, etc. It's not always the case. Jesus, it's definitely not always the case. But that was my fear. And I was so afraid that, well, shit, what if she turns out wrong and it's my fault? And that was the best thing that ever happened to me, her being born. Like, I had to deal with so much of my insecurities through that alone. It's actually made me a better person, because the way that I show up now, like even in relationships, romantic wise, I'm like, okay, am I behaving like the kind of person I would want my daughter to marry? Like, and that metric works as a reference point for me for, okay, well, that behavior and that action isn't how you would want someone that's going out with your daughter to behave. Stop doing that. Like, and, or on the flip side, you know, this is exactly how you would want someone that ends up with your daughter to behave. These are the actions you'd like them to take. Do more of that. And that is something that's really helped me become better as a person. It's helped me definitely become more empathetic. It's helped me become more flexible. And it came off the back of this, probably the first or second most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. So when you reframe fear as a positive thing, and behind every fear is a person that you want to be, the whole world can open up to you as a result, but you have to choose to see it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And all you're doing is setting the blueprint for what Holly is technically going to look for in a man anyway, in many respects. So, I mean, to me, I totally understand what you're saying. And then in a weird way, I'm like, no, it's straightforward, dude. All you just got to do is set the blueprint for how she needs to be treated in life. And that's it. Like, you treat her a certain way, that becomes the default, you know? I was always very fortunate. My dad said, I know I'm not a girl, my dad set a very good template for me. I mean, the piece of advice he gave me that never leaves me is, son, we either do something or we don't, but we never do something begrudgingly. And I think that really landed with me, because I don't think I've complained about anything since. And like, that's a man-to-man relationship. And he set the tone for kind of, if I would ask somebody something, would you mind getting me a glass? And they tut it and hummed and hawed about it, I'd like, leave it. And they're like, no, I'll get it. I'm like, no, leave it. I don't want it anymore. And I'm being firm on this one. And all of a sudden I've laid down the marker for, like, this is how I like my communication to be. I won't settle for anything less. And I mean, it's just the same that you're doing for Holly.
Yeah, I stole that directly from you. Like, I literally, you told me that 4 or 5 years ago about that I either a yes or a no, but I won't do anything begrudgingly. I'm either all in or I won't do it, but I will not say yes and do something begrudgingly. That sounds so trivial, but I hope it lands with people like the way it landed with me 4 or 5 years ago, because I'd never thought about, because I did that. Like, I would say yeah to things all the time and then be like, begrudgingly do it because I didn't really want to do it. And you said that to me and I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. Like, you either in and say yes and commit completely to whatever it is or to whoever it is, or no, but don't say yes and do something begrudgingly.
Well, it teaches you a bit of backbone, in my opinion, because it teaches you how to say no. Like, we all probably got ourselves into a position where we should have said no and we didn't, and we regret it. And I just think, if you stop and you think, okay, I'm not allowed to do this begrudgingly, would I do it? And you can't garner the respect you deserve, unless you actually, you know, say yes and no as and when you mean it. Like, I can only speak for myself, but personally, not that I don't respect, because that's, who the hell am I? But there's nothing I find less endearing in a person than when they agree to something and they just spend the entire day complaining about it. I'm like, just don't do it. Just, you know, I'd rather you said you didn't want to. Like, I'd rather you told me you don't want to hang out with me. The one thing I love about you is, Brian, do you want to hang out? No, I can't. Like, I got other plans. Or yes, and I know both are as true as the other, you know?
Yeah, it's I read there's an amazing book which I think is on your reading list as well. I think you actually downloaded it last week, The Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and he's
halfway through.
Oh, so good. Like, the section in there on how to say no, and he speaks a lot about the difference between short-term popularity for long-term respect when it comes to saying no to things. And I think that's really a really important reframe. It was for me anyways, that, you know, if you don't want to do something, just say yeah. And especially then, it tends to mean more when you do say yes, because you know you're not doing it begrudgingly. You know, I'm also big on prioritizing the important things. Like, similar to what I said earlier about being flexible, there was a time when I would have my to-do list and that had to get done above all else. Whereas now, and I love that it showed up kind of automatically. There's times when you message me the day before on a Wednesday or Thursday and you're like, oh, are you free tomorrow for coffee? And I'm like, yes, I can be. I'm like, I can move that around. That's perfectly fine. I would rather prioritize this and build up that, you know, you fall into that love section in the quadrants, for the lack of a fucking sloppier term, your familial love or your friendship love. But in terms of, yeah, that will heighten that quadrant, you know, where is if I just focus on my job, yeah, I'm building up my wealth quadrant and I'm probably going to earn more money from, you know, writing this blog post or writing this section of the book, but I'm going to be devoid of having an opportunity to hang out with someone that I'm super close with, or one of my best friends, or a family member if it's my mom or my daughter, you know, and it comes at the expense. You know, every time you say yes to something, or every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And understanding your priorities, what's important to you, who's important to you. You know, that's why I'm so big on the inner circle, you know, that you're better to have 4 quarters than 100 pennies, because then you can focus on the 3, 4, 5 people in your inner circle and make sure those relationships have what they need to grow, and you become a better version first than spreading it out over 100 people for whatever reason, you know. And I've done it in the past where I've had, you know, 25, 30 friends, most were drinking buddies, and then it's a sad time when you come out of that world. It was for me anyways, when you come out of that world and you realize that you've got nothing in common with the people you're spending most of your time with, and they also don't really want to hang out with you when you're not drinking with them. And that transition was difficult. I know we had something, I know you were similar to a degree, and I think a lot of people listening will have that moment either in the past or potentially in the future, when you're moving away from people who are doing what they're doing in terms of, you know, whatever life choices they're making, and your life is moving in a different direction, normally in a more positive way for what needs to be done for you. But that can be difficult. But a lot of that comes down to getting good with priorities and learning when to say no, and not getting caught with that like FOMO, fear of missing out, and just making the decision based on whatever the end goal and the relationships that you want to improve on.
Oh yeah, dude. And getting rid of the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Like, you can't build backbone from a place of weakness. You can't build virtues from a place of weakness. I know this might sound a bit heavy and probably Jungian philosophy, but because I believe in it so much, you can only build like virtues when you understand your own strength and understand yourself, and then you know how to channel it correctly. And like, it might sound like I'm saying being a monster. I'm only talking about day to day. I'm literally only talking about just having a set of principles and a set of virtues and knowing what you want to achieve. It might be getting leaner and avoiding nights out, and it might be running a business and avoiding spending money on stupid shit, even though it offends a couple of people. But yeah, dude, I completely agree. How are you supposed to morph into the person you need to become if you're not willing to, at very least, begin to act like the person you need to become? One thing I did last year when I was overcoming the injury was I asked myself, what would 10% body fat Paul do in this scenario when I was like 16% body fat, trying to cut my body fat down? I was like, well, he'd probably just get the hell on with it and not eat as much shit. And it sounds so straightforward, but you need to think to some degree with the mentality of what you're hoping to achieve. And to me, expedient behavior doesn't fall quite into that bracket at certain points in life. So, I mean, there's fear of missing out. When I was in Barcelona for the first 8 weeks, it looked like life was perfect, but all I did was trained and worked on the business and wrote and built the business, etc., etc. I left behind like a relatively handsome paying one-to-one business model to go online with a lot of belief, but a little bit of doubt. And you just kind of need to just, you know, suck shit at some point and just start focusing on what's important and focusing on the person you're going to need to become, because nobody else is going to do it for you. Like, nobody's coming to give you what you want. Nobody's coming to make you a faster runner in the desert or in the Arctic. Nobody's going to do the 250 kilometers for you. Nobody's taking my business online. And it'd be a shame if I didn't do it and regretted not becoming the person I need to become based on, I don't know, fear of missing out, other people's expectations. It just seems like a bit of a waste not to try.
Yeah, I love that message of what would 10% Paul do. I do something similar, but I actually think your wording is better. Like, I'm a big believer in the be, do, have model. Become who you need to be, step into that version, and then just wait for reality to catch up. But yeah, I think a very simple way of reframing it is, who's the best version of you? How do you want to look? How do you want to feel? What do you want to do? What job do you want to have? What relationship do you want to be in? And then how do you deserve that? Like, fast forward into 10% Paul, or, you know, higher paid Jane, or whatever it is, you know, loved Sarah or whatever. What does that person look like? And then start making decisions as if you were that person, because you'd be very surprised what happens when you've made a decision to become a certain person or have a certain thing, and then you're just waiting for reality to catch up. I'm a big believer in, you know, the law of attraction, power of intention, law of attraction with action. You know, law of attraction without actions, it's fucking distraction. It doesn't do anything. Like, you have to put in the action steps. You have to map your actions to your ambition. But I'm a big believer in holding the vision in your mind of who you want to be or what you want to have, because you bring that into your life. Whether you believe, you know, reticular activation system or your law of attraction and the spiritual side, I firmly believe, and I hold this belief system for as long as it supports me, that you can have whatever you want. Yes, the timeline may change. You may need to adjust the timeline or adjust the action steps. You may need to rechange the actions so they map to your ambition. But I believe you can have whatever you want. But making the decision as if you already have it makes it a lot easier, because you want to be lower body fat. What would someone with a lower level of body fat do? They wouldn't eat the ice cream every night. They would go and do their gym session whether they're tired or sore, and they'd make decisions like that. I love that takeaway, Paul. I think that's really, really valuable.
Yeah, and isn't it a lot more straightforward than you think? Like, you know, when you think, just for example, what would leaner Paul do? You're not thinking 10,000 crunches and no life. You're thinking slightly less ice cream and just don't skip the workout, like, you know, for 6 months, which is just a tiny little shift in mindset each day. But it, you know, all that jargon, tiny little changes over long-term yield the best results. Like, it's so bloody true. So that's the part I'm always begging my own personal clients, especially extreme fat loss clients, to get right. That it's not a case of do something super extreme in order to get what you want. It's, you make a small little adjustment tomorrow, and then in that begin to think like the person on the other end. Pretty damn soon, as you say, reality is just going to catch up, and you're basically going to be the slim person in the slightly fatter person's body until time allows you to catch up based on your choices and actions. I mean, it sounds so straightforward, but unfortunately, when we don't look like a supermodel in 4 days' time, you know, pushing the fuck it button, it ain't taking you any closer to who you want to be. I mean, it's momentarily satisfying, and it numbs you out to the reality of having to level up a little bit. But I just think that if that's someone in your immediate circle's mindset, that negativity spreads. And if you want that outlook to become your reality, or more to the point, if you don't want that outlook to become your reality, I highly recommend limiting time away from that, because you're either going to start to believe that and believe it's, you know, someone else's fault, and then you're not going to get what you want anyway. So yeah, I think it's paramount to just, on some level, do the small things that add up, that, like you say, over time take you closer to the person you need to be.
Yeah, like again, ordinary things done consistently well lead to extraordinary results. And I think the ability to delay gratification, and for everybody listening, that's learned, that's a skill, because it's something you have to get better at. Because I think evolutionary psychology, the way we're evolved, like, we're not designed to delay gratification, you know, by default. You know, we want the ice cream now, we want the hookup with the person now, we want the shopping or the new dress or the new t-shirt or jeans or whatever, we want it now. And an ability to delay gratification is something that has massively served me. And the reason I love fitness so much is because it teaches you to delay gratification. You have no choice. If you want to be leaner, or you want a six-pack, or you want a flat stomach, or you want a bigger bum, or bigger chest, or bigger arms, you have to be able to delay gratification to a degree. You have to be able to say no to, you might be able to go out once or twice a week, but you can't do it 4 or 5 nights a week. You might be able to eat McDonald's or Burger King once a week, but you won't be able to do it every day. You know, you might be able to have some in moderation, but you're not going to be able to do it all the time. You're going to have to stick to a nutritional strategy that works for you. You're going to have to stick to some training program, and an ability to delay gratification over time tends to lead you to getting into the shape you want, and then that carries over into other areas of your life. You know, yes, everybody wants to, you know, you can be going out with someone for 10 years and someone super attractive and super physically fit comes into your life and you're like, oh, oh shit, yeah, but maybe you don't want to make that choice of 30 minutes of pleasure to ruin the next fucking 10 years of somebody you could have spent the rest of your life with. Like, that's delaying gratification. That's making choices for the betterment of tomorrow, for the sacrifice of a little bit of pleasure today. And I think that's learned. That's a skill that's definitely becomes hardwired over time, and the more you do it.
You took the words out of my mouth, man. And when I was in Barcelona and Orla was there for the summer and she went home, I had one guy like probe me, but I had a couple of, maybe three people ask me, oh, you'll get tempted to cheat. Oh, how will you cope without hooking up for 3 or 4 weeks at a time? And I was like, really? I met physical encounters with a woman in 2014 and she's not here anymore. So perhaps that hindsight's enough to know that one moment isn't probably going to change my life, you know? Yeah, cool. I get 20 minutes of expedient pleasure today to sacrifice 70 years of my life. That's not even an internal conversation. That's not a dialogue. Like, that doesn't even seem legitimately, but again, and this isn't I'm better than you or a metric of condescension by any means. It's just like, I hold my values in relationships so high that maybe just some other people just don't trust themselves around attractive members of the opposite sex. I don't have that issue. I'm very aware that if I want 70 or 80 more years of marriage and a loving relationship, I probably should keep my dick in my pants when I'm away.
It's so true. Like, it's like, I love the Alcoholic Anonymous saying or mantra that if you don't want to slip, don't go to slippery places. Like, if you know that you struggle with, you know, cheating on a partner, then maybe don't go to a brothel or like a strip club. Like, maybe stay away from it. But like, and I say that as extreme because it's a joke, because if you know that you're going to be tempted to buy, you want to save for a house or a deposit, or you want to save for a holiday, but you know that you spend too much money on stupid shit, on clothes or bags, like not stupid shit, but stuff that you probably don't need right now at the expense of what you do want. That's the same. That's systems over willpower. Like, don't go to the shops. You know, don't go in and look at the dress and be like, oh yeah, I'm just looking. I'm not going to buy it, knowing that you're probably going to fucking buy it. Like that. I think identifying your weaknesses, you know, I'm the same with food. Like, I intentionally don't keep chocolate and ice cream in my house because I know if it's there, one, I have to make the decision, and you get decision fatigue because you're making the decision to not have something that you know is there. But two, I know I'm probably going to eat it. Like, realistically, I've fooled myself so often that I'm like, yeah, I'll keep the ice cream in Ben & Jerry's and I'll have it on Saturday. And you buy it on Tuesday and it's gone by fucking 7 p.m. that night. Like, I know myself that I can't do that. So don't want to slip, don't go to slippery places. That comes with being real, and I think identifying your weaknesses in whatever area of your life, nutrition, you know, your training, your, you know, keeping your dick in your pants, like, or go, you know, shopping or whatever it is if you're trying to save. Like, understand that systems beat willpower, and that you have to be able to identify the weaknesses and then delay the gratification and make sure that you're making choices that map to your ambition. Like, I have to remind myself of that all the time. I'm like, you're not a fucking animal. Like, you're not a dog. You're not a monkey. Like, have a higher level of thinking and stop, you know, fucking everything you see or buying everything you want or eating everything you want. Like, and just talking, for me anyway, talking to myself like that helps sometimes, but being real with it and being honest with it helps too. Yeah, and I just wanted to pull up that point because I think there's a lot of value in it.
Yeah, I completely agree, dude. I mean, if you want to have a healthy relationship with food or a healthy relationship with your girlfriend, best off to, you know, have a fairly healthy relationship with yourself and treat yourself with the same respect that you. I just think it's a very straightforward thing in many respects. If you continue to trade things of meaning for things of expedience, things of momentary satisfaction, I just don't think you can't be massively surprised when your life is one big random result. The relationship one is always going to be a big one for me, just because I'm just so aware on how much work relationships take with respect of, I don't just want to be with someone, I want to like be in love, and I want to have a really healthy, like, I mean, relationships, for example, relationship with food are tricky because that's all on you. But relationships with other people are really tricky because, I mean, Orla decides in 3 years she doesn't love me anymore, no matter how good of a boyfriend I am. That's beyond my control anymore. So do you ever hear somebody get to the point where it's like, we were together for 10 years and I just didn't see it coming. I thought everything was perfect. I struggle with that a little bit because I don't see how you could not see some degree of capitulation or some kind of signs or some kind of warnings or some kind of triggers. But I guess that's a story for another day. But yeah, I just think keeping a close tabs on how your relationship with food is, how it makes you feel, how your relationship with yourself is, how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, and specifically how your relationship with your partner, your significant other is, and how well you communicate, how much you're willing to take responsibility for the fact you don't want to be right in an argument. You want to solve the issue. Massive distinction. I kind of went off on a tangent on that one. That's probably nothing to do with what you were talking about. So I do
No,
apologize.
it's great. Like when I was at the Tony Robbins seminar a couple of years ago, he's got a big thought process there that, you know, in a marriage you can be happy or you can be right. And, you know, you mentioned something there, and the term willful blindness comes to mind, where the person, and I've witnessed this, I've lived it in parts, but witnessed it more, and a high end of learning from other people's mistakes, where I would talk to the person that's like, yeah, my you know, marriage ended after 10 years, never saw it coming, you know, or, you know, my job ended after however many years, I had no idea, it came out of the blue. I'm like, that's willful blindness, where, you know, I call it ostrich in the head syndrome, or ostrich head in the sand syndrome, where you're burying your head because you're uncomfortable with dealing with the reality, and facts don't cease to exist just because you choose to ignore them. And that's something I had to get real with myself, because that for me, symbiotically would always come with mountains out of molehills, where I would just ignore situations and I would numb out to it, either through alcohol or drugs or television or, you know, sports teams, which is something else, you know, escapism. And I would have willful blindness around the situation because I really didn't want to deal with the discomfort. And when it comes back to the root, it's just dealing with the discomfort of whatever it is in your life that you're not happy with, and being real with it.
Yeah, and it's a really hard thing to tap into. It's an exceptionally difficult thing to tap into. Sometimes I wonder if I take for granted the fact that I almost think, how can't people pull this out of themselves? But then if I didn't have you to outlay certain problems in my life, if I didn't have Orla to outlay certain insecurities, I wonder what life would be. Like, I wonder, would I be as mentally strong? I mean, I obviously wouldn't be as mentally strong, but I take for granted when I get frustrated with people's inability to address willful blindness. A bit like, maybe they've never literally had a voice or a means to outlay that in their life. It's an incredibly powerful thing to vocalize, because we're all afraid. I know I am. I know I have been in the past. I'm afraid to come across vulnerable, or I have been. I'm not as much anymore at all. So when I say something out loud, I'm struggling in this area of my life, it actually feels better. It feels, oh wow, I've taken the real. I'm just typical hypocrite, you know. Take ownership for the fact you're fat, but I'm fine and I don't want to talk about my problems. And every time I take ownership, I'm like, right, I'm no longer willfully blind to this situation. I've addressed it exists. What's the next step? And then a lot of people use this through means of counseling, which, if that's your system, fucking have at it. And I personally use good, deep conversation, good constructive criticism, feedback from people that I trust. I think getting people that know you to get real honest with you is such a wonderful thing to do. I don't think, I can only speak for myself, I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing, not that I'm any crazy story, but doing what I'm doing if it weren't for you and Orla picking me apart. And I go back to this so often, but picking me apart, pulling habits out of me that I beg to have pulled out of me, because if I remain willfully blind to certain things, I'm just going to keep doing the same stupid horseshit and get frustrated with myself.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, I think I had Marcus Smith on the podcast recently, and he was speaking, and I said this to you over coffee last week, that he was speaking about his wife, Holly's her name too, that his wife is his go-to. Like, you know, they've been married for years, and Marcus is just an amazing guy. I love him. And he was like, she's a sounding board. You know, he ran 30 marathons in 30 days in Dubai, and she was like, she's my sounding board. She knows sometimes when to interject and offer an opinion, and she knows sometimes when I just need to be heard, or I'm trying to clarify my own ideas out loud, and she's literally just been a sounding board. And I brought this up to you with coffee last week, because that's how I feel with you a lot of the times, where it's as if I have all the raw materials for what I want in my head, but until I get it out there verbally and bounce it off somebody, particularly somebody I trust, it doesn't really form. and it doesn't make any sense until it's out there and out loud. And I think that is creating an environment and creating a relationship romantically or friendship wise or familial, creating relationships with people where you can be vulnerable, or you can just be a sounding board where you're like, okay, all these fucking thoughts are in my head. You know, for me, if it's a relationship, or for you, if it's business, or for me, if I'm making a decision or whatever it is, I put all the facts out there. And sometimes you'll offer a nugget of gold that helps, and other times you end up figuring it out yourself just by having that sounding board. And I think that's a really important strategy for people to definitely play around with, because it's something that's helped me so much over the years.
Yeah, same. Don't you find when you start to speak, certainly to someone you're comfortable speaking with, that you can actually catch the moment you realize you sound like an illogical twat?
Literally. Like I think we had this conversation last week or 2 weeks ago when I said something, and then as soon as I said it out loud, I'm like, that's not true. I'm like, I don't think that. And it's literally building up. I can't even remember what it was, but I remember it was building up in my head for about a week, and I can't even remember what the idea was. And then as soon as I said it out loud to you, I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, that's not fucking true. Like, where did that come from? And then it was gone. And then you've literally worked it out in your own head. And we all do that. Like, this is, you know, I'm big on the philosophy that people are always like, well, if I could just take the advice that I give my friends, I'd be doing a lot better off. And that kind of works in the same way, where you know yourself what you need to do with your boyfriend or girlfriend or boss or whatever it is, you know, the person you're having an issue with. You probably know yourself what you need to do, but sometimes you just need to get it out there and verbalize it to somebody as a sounding board, knowing it's not being judged. Like, I think that's a big thing, you know, creating an environment where there's no judgment, you know, and you're really good at this, where you're like, okay, I'm just gonna put it all out there now, and, you know, let me know what you think. You know, am I being irrational? Another thing I stole directly from you, I remember you came to me with a situation a couple of years ago. I think it was when you and Nora were going out first. I can't even remember the circumstance, but I remember you're like, okay, I'm going to give you all the facts, let me know, am I being an irrational twat? And I remember, I'm going to steal that. I'm like, that's a really, really good way. And I've used that since going forward. If I'm having an issue with somebody, I'll talk to you or I'll talk to somebody else that I'm close with and be like, okay, I'm just going to lay out all the facts. Tell me, am I being completely irrational? 9 out of 10 times I normally am, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I remember going to you with that problem, and I remember saying, am I being irrational? And as I said it, I was like, there's an insecurity you're just not addressing. It's your fault. You know you're wrong. You need someone you trust to tell you you're wrong. And
that comes back, and I think we'll tie it up here because, geez, we're nearly gone fucking 2 hours on this. I could probably go another hour. This is how our conversations normally go. But it shows the importance of your inner circle, and that's something that came back so much from episode 1 and episode 2, and I'll link those in the show notes. If you haven't listened to those and you got this far, nearly 2 hours in, you're going to go back and you will love episode 1 and 2. But so much that came up is your inner circle. How do you pick your inner circle? What do you look for in people that should be in your inner circle? The people you spend the most time with, your 5 people, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And how do we have conversations? How do we handle problems? You know, we did that at the end of episode 2 when you were asking about college, and I was like, that's genuinely, I was like, that came off the cuff. I was like, that's exactly how we bounce ideas back and forth. So hopefully everybody listening has got tremendous value. If you've stuck this long, I hope you did, because it was obviously the episode that was needed to be recorded if we've held your attention for 2 hours. Paul, I can't thank you enough. Is there anything you'd like to end on? And be sure to tell everybody where's the best place to find out more about you, and I'll link all those in the show notes as well.
Sorry, I nearly interrupted you there. I was so eager. I think this is a Danny Lennon podcast thing, so if it's not, I apologize to whoever. But he always asks people, I think, at the end, if they could do one thing or recommend one thing to make people's day better, what would it be? And I'm actually intrigued to know what you would tell your people as your one rule to make people's day. I know you've loads, I know what they are, but what would you tell people off the cuff is your one thing that would make people's day better if they did a little bit more of?
I think the context is always so key, but one of the things that I've been really honing in on, and I've covered this a little bit on the podcast, but not massively, and I've been doing a lot of self-reflection on this, is make sure that the majority of your day, your 80-20, if we're working off Pareto distribution, which is what we talked about earlier, that 80% of your, 80% of your problems come from 20% of your clients, or whatever it is in whatever area you channel it. But I would try and create a life, or design a life, or put action steps in place that lead to a life in the future of who you want to become, that allows you to have 80% of your day doing things that you love to do, that make you happy, with people that fill you up inside. I think that thought process is something that I've been really hammering in on, because it's funny, I've gone both ways, where I'm like, no, 100% of your day should be with people that you love and respect and that fill you up, and you should be doing 100% of things that you love. But life isn't really like that. Like, there's 20% of where you're going to, getting cut off in traffic, or someone's going to say something rude to you at the gym, or somebody's going to have a hateful comment to you on social media. Like, that's life. That's how life is. And I think one thing that could make people's lives better, and I think it's a message that I would have liked to receive at 24, 25, was set up an environment with the people or the job or the things that you do that make you feel happy. One of the things that I always say is, we overcomplicate life. That make a list of the things that make you happy, do more of those things, make a list of the people that make you happy, spend more time with those people, make a list of the things that make you unhappy, do less of those things, and make a list of the people who make you unhappy and spend less time with them. It's difficult to apply, but it's simple in principle. And I think if you do nothing and take nothing away from any of the podcasts that I ever record with, people from my inner circle like Paul, from interviews or from solo episodes, it's make that list, because you can't hit a target you can't see. If you have it in front of you, somewhere visual, and you know what your success metric is for being happier, and you know what the reverse of that is for being unhappy, you can avoid the things that make you unhappy, and you can do more of the things that make you happy.
It's awesome. It's fucking awesome.
What about you? Flip it back.
I'll go super straightforward, and I technically need to work on this because I justify it as being more of an introvert as I get older, but it's just a pathetic excuse. I would say, just for immediate returns, try and smile at 5 or 10 more people tomorrow, especially if you're someone struggling with friends or a girlfriend. Try and literally make active effort to smile and make eye contact with 5 and 10 people. You just don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know what story they have to tell. You don't know how much they're going to like you. You just don't know what's on the other end. I think that could have that's going to be 70 people you smile at this week, and God knows how many in a year, and you just never know who you're going to meet along the way. Could change your life. It's 2 random people have come into my life in the last couple of years and changed it and flipped it on its head, and I actually half like to think it's because I kind of smiled at both those fuckers, so that's the reason.
I agree. That was it. I'm like, oh, that fucker smiled at me from across the dressing room. But a call to action for everybody listening. Have a think. What resonated there? There's 2 that me and Paul have given you. One is very kind of metaphysical out there in terms of the long-term perspective, and one is very practical, smile day to day. DM us, or even better, if you're confident, tag it on your Instagram story and tell us what's that thing for you. What are you going to do today, this week, that's going to make your life a little bit better? What's on your happiness list? Are you going to smile more? What are you going to avoid? Either DM it to us or tag it on your story and tag us. I'd love to see it, because sometimes just putting it out there is enough to keep yourself accountable. And Paul's an awesome way to end it. Tell everybody, where's the best place to find out more about you, where you spend your most time, where you hang out online, etc.
Thank you, sir. I have my podcast, Paul Dermody Podcast. My Facebook is Paul Dermody. Shockingly enough, my Instagram is Paul Dermody PT. So Instagram, Facebook, podcast, I hang out in all the usual spots. My favorite personal medium, bizarrely enough, in 2019 is my email list. So if you'd like to join, there's a link in my Instagram bio. I don't try and sell you shit. It's just storytelling, because I just love writing and sharing stories and anecdotes. And that's it. That's me in a nutshell. I'm also a personal trainer. I do online coaching. So if you are in any way interested in working with me in an online capacity, I don't take many one-to-ones anymore. And right now I'm full. Shoot me a message. I'm sorry to go with a shameless plug there, B-Rai, but
plug away, mate. We're fucking 2 hours in. I'm like, that's the least you can do after taking 2 hours of your time.
No, man, I love this. I really do love catching up with you. I love sharing the thoughts we have. I just hope it helps somebody and resonates with somebody somewhere. Like, Thank you, dude. I appreciate it.
The pleasure is all mine. And for those of you, because our first episode was an hour, second one was an hour and a half, this one's nearly 2 hours. And the feedback I got from the hour and a half episode, which is the longest I'd ever ran on a podcast, and people were like, I didn't want that to end. So if that was you, you got what you wanted, even though this one is ending, but it's 2 hours.
You're going to be the next Joe Rogan, dude. You're going to be the next Joe Rogan of Irish podcasting.
Man, that'd be awesome. It's we'll keep the goals high. As long as I'm loving the process, it's my favorite thing I'm doing. Like, get to fucking connect with you and chat for 2 hours and record it. So hopefully it provides a load of value to everyone listening. From a selfish standpoint, I always get so much from our conversations. So yeah, mate, fucking rock on episode 4.